awesome card on its own.
Yeah, the thing that always interests me about the Bant Hexproof deck is you see Shahar on your left and Brent on your right. The thing that always interests me about this deck is you always saw people playing 4 Strangler guys on the sideboard. It never really made much sense to me, where people would want to play maybe Loxodon Smiter in that spot, or they were playing a card like Fencing Ace, or you see in Shahar's list he has 4 Silverblade Paladins. I would personally, I like having a lot of Strangler guys to main for the reasons that you mentioned. Also, the tools that people try to use to beat this deck are cards that line up beautifully to Strangler guys. Supreme Verdict. Devour Flesh, Barter and Blood, Liliana the Veil. If you set your deck to have 8 cards in Voice of Resurgence and Strangler Geist as ways to just embarrass these cards that are supposed to be good against you, I find that it makes Bant Hexproof so much better than the normal list. And Strangler Geist is kind of on the uptick right now, where there's some other people in this tournament with huge names like a Brian Kibler and an Owen Turtenwald playing that card, in their deck as well. So I think Strangler Geist maybe on a little bit of comeback trail.
You don't really have to twist Brian Killer's arm to get him to put some Strangler Geist in his
That's
deck,
true.
in fairness. But yeah, no, overall, I do agree with your point, though. I think that card is poised to come back in a variety of decks.
Funny how that card kind of hit the scene in a big way and then fell off and then came back a little bit.
And we are on our way here. Shahar leading off with the first turn tapped Breeding Pool.
So again, the Bant Hexproof deck only does have 1 turn 1 play in Absence Pilgrim. If it doesn't have that, you can expect for it to have something on turn 2, as Brent does have his Stronger Noble. There's Voice Resurgence to block the road.
Yep, so this is going to be one of those Pillar of Flame checks right here.
The fun thing here, too, is that Madcap Skills does a nice job of just kind of getting through this.
Yeah.
The addition of Madcap Skills to this deck is really I think it's really good. I think it's really smart, and it does a lot of things for this deck that red decks normally can't do.
It is definitely awesome against Voice of Resurgence.
Yeah, which is like a scary card for red deck.
Yeah.
So, Madcap Skills on your Strongkirk Noble. Gonna make it a 4-power creature. That die is gonna be the counter that Strongkirk Noble gets. We're looking at a 5/2 Noble on turn 2, and putting Shahar to the test right away. Is it gonna be a race? Are you gonna try to play defense and get 2 guys? Because if that's the case, Jostad can break that up pretty easily with a couple burn spells. But Unflinching Courage is gonna turn things around, looks like.
So this is gonna be a lot of 2 ships passing in the night this game.
Yep. So Shahar is going to gain some life, 4 to be exact, undo that hit from the Strongkirk Noble, and we're just going to be going back and forth a little do-si-do.
So we'll see if Brent is able to take care of this. I think he's probably 2 turns off. It looks like he has 2 copies of Searing Spear in his hand, and I think next turn, if he's not able to kill this Voice Resurgence, which I believe is unlikely, next turn could be very ugly.
Yeah. We'll find out a little bit more from Brent. He is from Miami, Florida. Last name is pronounced Jostad, in case you are wondering. And a little fun info about him is he said, quote, "I wish I was playing Legacy." So in comes the Noble, another counter there. Stomping Ground's going to come and play tapped, and you see in his hand he's got Searing Spears, he has a Rakdos, Cackler, and just what does he want to accomplish this turn? Which looks like we might just see an Unleashed Cackler and passing the turn back. And as you said, things are going to get a lot uglier moving forward. So Shenhar going to play a Hallowed Fountain untapped. He's going to push himself down a little bit, but that Elevator is going to be going back up in a big way. As a Rancor on that Voice of Resurgence, and now Silverblade Paladin pairing with that for a little double strike action. So we're looking at 2, 4, 6, that's 12.
Yeah, that's a big swing.
That is not a big swing.
A drain for 12, not shabby.
And so now the card that's really interesting here, you see the typical cards in Voice of Resurgence, Unflinching Courage, and Rancor, but Silverblade Paladin is the one where it's kind of a debated spot on if you're supposed to play this card or not, because it is a very fragile body, but it does provide a unique effect that no other card can really provide. So, how do you feel about this card in the deck versus, additional Strangler guys, Loxodon Smiter, Fencing Ace, that sort of thing?
I think I like Silverblade Paladin a lot because it's just basically another haste threat. It can be very powerful, finishing someone off in the turns where, you've enchanted your creature, so it can shorten the clock by turn. It can also play the role of a reasonably normal threat. It's actually okay on its own. Mm-hmm. So I'm a fan of it in the deck. I wonder if it's, maybe slightly rough on the mana because you have a lot of, you have a fair number of blue-green duels and what have you. I think that maybe there's an argument there that's the reason you wouldn't want to play it, but I do think it's naturally very powerful in the deck.
So Searing Spear is going to take a shot over there, Voice Resurgence. I think we're going to see a second Searing Spear take a shot there. And Shahar is perfectly fine that because Rancor's coming back to the grip. A Elemental Token is going to come into play, and I feel like the Elemental Token is going to Soul Bond with that and make an attack for lethal, which it is. So Jostad is going to pick it up, and Mr. Shenhar is up 1.
Yep. In that game, I'm willing to bet is quite different if Brent is on the play instead of on the draw.
Wildly different.
Yeah, that's a very different game.
Wildly different game. As we're going to take a look at the sideboards here, I have Brent in front of me, and he's going to need some cards to turn this bad boy around. And we're going to look at 3 Volcanic Strengths, 2 Electrickeries, 3 Mizium Mortars, 4 Skullcrack, 3 Traitorous Blood. A little bit earlier we saw a player opting for Mark of Mutiny instead of Traitorous Blood, but, you know, for the most part, they're pretty interchangeable. Cards that are going to help him in this matchup, you can have the Skullcrack debate all day long about if you want to try to blanket Unflinching Courage for the turn, but I don't think that that's the strongest of plays.
Sure. Although, to go over to Shahar's sideboard really quickly here, he does have 2 copies of Fog. Which, you know, if that's a card you're anticipating them bringing in,
okay,
has some utility there, along with Near Hearth Pilgrim. I mean, there's a reasonable amount of life gain in this deck.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of your more expensive creatures are not at their best here because the games are just too fast for that sort of thing. So, you know, I talked a lot about before when we were doing our round one feature match about being too, you can't dilute your threats too much in an aggressive deck like this. I think cards like Hellrider are actually just, it's very unlikely the game is about that sort of thing because it's just too fast. If Shahar's deck is doing its thing, he's going to gain so much life to push himself out of range that it's actually, I think, reasonable to have a plan of 1-drops, 2-drops, and a bunch of spells. I actually think that structure might be a lot better than having things like Boros Reckoner and Hellrider in your deck. So this is a place where if I'm in Brent's shoes, I'm actually pretty happy to sideboard a lot of spells in.
Yeah, I mean, you have the option of Skullcrack, you have the option of Mizium Mortars. Electrickery can get a little bit interesting because it is a unique way to be able to take care of, you know, Absence Pilgrim. It can also take care of Invisible Stalker and Near Hearth Pilgrim that we brought up as well. So there's some utility there in Electrickery. And, you know, while I don't think Traitorous Blood is great in this matchup, it could do something interesting that we don't see coming. It can break up a Soulbond chain, it can take over a huge creature, obviously none of the hexproof ones, but there are some things that it can do in this matchup that no other card can. Is it worth investing a slot? And I think that's a different conversation altogether, but it's not something to ignore.
Yeah, I think the fact that he has Traitorous Blood in his sideboard, I guess, he has it instead of Mark, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, some people play Mark Mutiny, some people even play Traitor's Instinct for the +2/+0, but, you know, you're going to find a threatened effect somewhere in these sideboards.
Sure. It's possible it's more of an anti-Thrytus card if he values giving the guy Trample over giving it +1/+1.
Sure.
So I'm not sure. Maybe that's reading too much into it. I don't know. But although you know, Trample is actually potentially very valuable here too because Shahar may have 1 chump blocker back and then giving a creature with a bunch of enchantments on it. Trample is very valuable, but I think the fact that Shahar's threat base is so dense with hexproof creatures means it's really risky to bring in a threatened effect. And you want to leave those at home. I think Electrickery is fine here.
Yeah.
He's got a fair number of one-toughness creatures. And I think the Skullcracks are actually reasonable because there's so much life gain. Shahar's deck is all about, you know, getting in one big shot where you can Skullcrack and kill on the way back.
Yep.
Because Shahar's deck isn't actually going to put up much resistance against what Brent's doing. And the fact that there's cards like Fog make it even randomly even better.
Yeah. We take a look at Shenhar's sideboard. As you mentioned, the Fogs over there. He's also got some copies of Advent of the Worm, a Johnny Call Their Pride, Strangleroot Guys, Wolfer Avenger, 1 Rest in Peace, and some Near Hearth Pilgrims. One of the things that has always been difficult with Bant Hexproof, and it's kind of this puzzle that people have not solved yet, is what do you sideboard and how do you sideboard with this deck? You see a lot of 2-ofs in Shenhar's sideboard and the 4 Wolfer Avengers, and this is a pretty different take on the sideboard than we've seen recently. I mean, heck, even a Johnny Call of the Pride's kind of hanging out there. That's not a card you really see often in many sideboards, let alone see played in Standard right now. So what do you make of this sideboard that looks like Shahar and probably Josh or Leighton have come up with together?
I think that these are probably mostly for control decks. I think in post-board games where you're anticipating just playing against more sweepers, you need to normalize the deck a little bit because your plan of putting a bunch of creature enchantments on 1 creature is unlikely to be effective against decks that have Liliana, maybe they have Terminus, what have you. So I think in some matchups you want to just cut some of your, you know, your ethereal armors and your unflinching courages and just bring in good anti-control, like just dense threats like Avenger and a Johnny Call of the Pride and Advent of the Worm. So you can play more of a normal game. You can still play cards like Ranker because they're just pretty powerful for your attacking deck to have. That's fine, but you probably want to be less all in on the creature enchantment plan against control decks, and those 8 cards allow you to just play a more conventional game.
All right, so we see Jostad does have a strong Kirk Noble to start. Shenhar does have an Avacyn's Pilgrim for his turn as well, so he'll be accelerating this game, but one thing he will not be doing is blocking that, is using Mizzing Mortars as the draw step. But the question is, does he have a second land? And it does not look like he does, so Noble's going to come across for 1 to become a 2-2. And then let's see if the follow-up, if he does have a land that we can't make out, and it does not look like he does, so we're not going to see a Mizzing Mortars try to take care of that Pilgrim, so Shenhar is going to have the opportunity to ramp here, but no blue mana yet.
Sure. So both players missing a couple pieces.
So there's a voice, and now an Ethereal Armor. That's going to make it a 3-2, excuse me, a 3-3 first striker. And all right.
There's a stomping ground. All right. Big draw.
Now, I think we, I can't look into the future, at least not yet, but we might see Mizzing Mortars here on the Voice of Resurgence, and that's going to make the token into a 2-2, which is still going to do a nice job against that initial Stronghold Noble. That's what makes this card so difficult to play against, and so here is your Mizzing Mortars taking out the Voice of Resurgence, and you see Shahar reaching across the table already for an Elemental token, which is a 2-2.
I think I would have preferred to just attack and use the Gore Clan Rampager that was in his hand.
Sure.
You get to trigger both the Nobles. If Shahar doesn't block, then you still have the Mortars play post-combat, but I think that would have been a more efficient use of his resources there.
Shenhar draws a Hollowed Fountain for the turn, so you see his hand. He has an Invisible Stalker over there. He's got a Rancor. There's Ethereal Armor, and the front half of his Voice of Resurgence has gone bye-bye for now. So now Shenhar has a little bit of planning to do and how he wants to go about, kind of worrying about Jostad now that he does have a second land and access to some things, including Mizzing Mortars, which you now know about if you're Shenhar. Rancor looks to be the choice of the day here. Shenhar is going to take a damage or 2 and play a Geist Saint Draft. And he's going to be aggressive. So in for 5. How do you feel about this aggressive line? No interest in playing defense at all.
I like it when your opponent's stalled on lands.
Okay.
You got to get Brent out of the game before he can draw lands to catch up.
Well, Brent draws another land, so he's going to try to catch up. This land also going to deal him 2, however, if he wants to play it on tap, which is probably quite relevant in the situation that Shenhar is trying to create, which is a racing one.
Well, again, he still has the option here of his first order of business being to attack and possibly using Gore Clan Rampager if Shahar blocks.
Sure.
I think that play was especially important last turn because it would have just allowed him to have more forward momentum with his Nobles. They would have been bigger, which would have been, is meaningful for a variety of reasons. But
so the Nobles are coming across. Looks like Jostad is agreeing with your play. I mean, at the very least, he's representing Gore Clan Rampager. We, of course, know he has it, but he is going to be representing it, and Shahar says, all right, I'm more than happy to take that damage. And it might be time to see a Mortar. I think Mizzing Mortars has to take down this Elemental token. I feel like it almost has no choice. I think it's so big and only going to get bigger.
I mean, there is an option for just playing Flinthoof Boar and passing the turn back, because that also holds off Geist Saint Draft.
That's true, too.
Yeah, I mean...
All right.
Then potentially you can just go ahead and Mortars the token the following turn.
Do you play this Stomping Ground on tap and get that Rakdos Cackler established? Or
no, you gotta... those 2 points matter too much right now.
Turtle up? Oh, boy.
Oh, boy. That is, I believe that is Unflinching Courage.
That is exactly what that is. That is timely. You see Shenhar is going to play Invisible Stalker. You see him playing that pre-combat to add to the count on the Elemental token. And in comes Geist of Saint Draft, an Angel.
Beating.
Yeah. And the other thing too is that you have to count the Angel, not just for the 4 points of damage that represents, but the additional 1 it represents for the Elemental token too, making that Elemental into a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 power creature now.
And now, Geist of Saint Draft is now out of Flinthoof Boar range, and it's a bunch of the dominoes are starting to fall here.
That's what we call a good draw.
Yeah.
Unflinching Courage,
5,
really
6,
the card
7,
that just turned
11,
things around for this deck.
13, 15. So there's 15 coming across, and all of it tramples or flies, so Brent can chump block and go to 1, basically.
Yeah. Rock, hard play. Shahar going to go back up to 16. I don't know any red deck in this one that can deal 16 damage in 1 turn. At least not yet.
No.
You can see Jostad kind of going through the same math that you just did, Patrick, of trying to figure out what he can do to survive, but because all these creatures are going to have trample, then Unflinching Courage gaining life, it seems difficult.
8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, he has 15 damage coming across, and the boar can absorb 3.
Yep.
So, that's not good. Is the short of it.
Yeah. A very courageous Geist-Sustained Trap, and a very good draw step there for Shenhar. But again, you know, that's what this deck is capable of doing. One draw step can turn everything around for Van Hexproof.
Yes.
You know, it only takes one of those creature enchantments. I mean, we could argue that what if that was a Rancor instead of Unflinching Courage, or a Spectral Flight, or an Ethereal Armor? Any of those would have been very
Still
good draw.
awesome, yeah.
Silverblade Paladin pairing up with the Elemental token. Any of those things would have been a very, very good draw at this point.
And Voice of Resurgence, obviously, just a huge addition to this deck.
Yeah.
I mean, again, having a super powerful normal card to add is a huge deal.
You know, it's funny that we call this deck Bant Hexproof because it does have hexproof cards in it, Invisible Stalker and Geist-Sustained Traps, but you can't sell those other threats short in Voice of Resurgence and Shrangaroo Geist and Silverblade Paladin. They might be killable, but are they really?
No.
Are they really killable?
Nope.
So Shenhar, very, very happy passing the turn back. Jostad going to take a draw step. It is another Mizium Mortars. Those nobles are just a little small, and the big problem for him is that, yes, he can Mortars that Elemental token, because it is 4 toughness now instead of 5 where it was in his previous attack, but that Geist-Sustained Trap is going to make an Angel, and that Invisible Stalker still not killable.
Yeah. And I do feel, you know, obviously we'll look at this board now, and it looks like the game was totally lopsided and was that the whole way. I do believe that Brent's choice to Mortars the Voice instead of attacking first and possibly being able to trade with the Core Clan Rampager was a big deal. He would have been able to save him Mortars, and if Shahar had just said, all right, I'll take it no blocks, he still has access to the same Mortars play that he made anyway.
Yep.
He would have gotten in a couple points of damage with his Storm Criminals, they would have been a little bit bigger, etc., etc. But the big upside is if Shahar just blocks, the game is totally different.
Yeah.
You get to deal a bunch of damage, you still have a Mortars left over, and it takes a little bit longer for Shahar to get his creature enchantment deal on here, so.
Yeah. And also, the other thing too is that it also might even just change the way Shahar plays, where, you know, Shahar went aggressive from the start of this game. He had no interest in trying to play a defensive game, and maybe it forces Shenhar to play a more defensive game, which I think would favor the red deck, because the red deck does not play defense very well.
Yep.
You know, so maybe it just changes the total mind frame of Shenhar and what he needs to accomplish during the game as well. Either way, Shahar Shenhar, Platinum level pro, comes off of his 3-round bye with a victory to get his day off to a nice start. Van Hexproof moving on, defeats Brent Jostad 2-0 over red-green aggro.
So we have some more feature matches on the way. David Sharkman, Pro Tour champion, appears to be playing a Jund control deck that we're going to have on camera momentarily.
Sharkman from